will be replacing the inner and outer tie rod ends in this 2003 Toyota Camry. To prep this vehicle, I have installed wheel chocks behind the rear tires. I have applied the parking brake. I have jacked the vehicle up and supported the front end with safety stands, and I have removed the wheel. If we take a look at our wheel assembly, we can clearly see our outer tie rod end as well as the inner tie rod end. We first want to loosen the jam nut. This is on the connection point between the outer tie rod and the inner tie rod. Because this has been on there quite a while, I will apply a little Amsoil metal protector to aid in the removal process, and then we'll use a 19mm wrench to loosen this up. Next, I'm going to shift my focus to the outermost portion of the outer tie rod, and we can see that we do have a castle nut. This nut is held in by a cotter pin. We're going to attempt to work that cotter pin free. First applying a little Amsoil metal protector, and then using needle nose pliers and some other pliers to see if we can pull this loose. And we're not making any progress, so I'm going to go ahead and break off these tabs on the cotter pin. And then I'm going to attempt to use a punch to see if I can work the rest of that cotter pin through. And that punch didn't work, so we are just going to install a 17mm wrench and use a little bit of persuasion to get that loose. Now, in many cases, we can use just a little bit of persuasion to free that tie rod end. And next option is to use a pickle fork. Next, we want to spin off the outer tie rod. However, we want to count the number of revolutions and write that number down, so when we reinstall our new one, we can have roughly the same alignment. 18, 19. And using a 19mm socket and a pair of vice grips, we can remove the jam nut. If we take a look at the connection point between our inner tie rod and boot, we have a spring clamp that needs to be removed. If we follow the boot all the way towards the back, we can see a small clip. This is for a one-time use clamp. Using a pry bar, we can break this off, and then we can work that boot off. If we take a look at our tie rod end, we have a washer that has been bent over. We need to unbend this. And we have that same bent washer on the top side as well. Again, with a pry bar and hammer, we can bend that out. Next, we can install our inner tie rod end removal tool. And we can use a 3/8" ratchet with a long extension to loosen that up. Don't lose your washer. We'll do a little bit of cleanup with the grease. And the new tie rod does not have a new washer, so we will be reusing the old washer. And we want to make sure that the teeth go on first and lock into the little grooves. And then we can thread on our new inner tie rod, making sure that the teeth of that washer remain lined up. We can then install our tie rod end tool and tighten that up. And we want this to be nice and snug. We don't want to over tighten it though. We then want to bend over our lock washers. Then we can slide on our new boot. And install my new clamp around the back, making sure that my boot is seated properly. So I was able to get that clamp tightened from above. It did take 2 people to make sure I got the tool on the clamp and the clamp positioned correctly. And at my front connection point, I'm going to add just a little bit of Amsoil heavy duty metal protector. This will prevent that boot from sticking, and then I can reinstall my clamp. On my threads, I will apply some additional Amsoil heavy duty metal protector. Next comes the jam nut. And then we want to install the outer tie rod end, the same number of turns. Mine was 19 turns, 18, 19. We can then spin on that jam nut. We can then reconnect our outer tie rod end and start that castle nut by hand. This will then be torqued to 36 foot-pounds, or possibly a hair tighter, as we do need to align our cotter pin. And the last item is to tighten down the jam nut and straighten out the tie rod end. At this point, we can reassemble everything back together. It is highly recommended that you do an alignment after this type of service.